Our interview this morning is with Michael T. Storey. Mike was born in Fort Worth in October of 1942. He served in both the United States Army and the United States Navy, served during the Cold War and during the Vietnam period. He initially went in the service in September of 1961, and his final separation was in February of 1969. This interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Thursday, August the 30th, 2012. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Mike in any way. Also in the room today we have Milton Gibson and Gary Burton, who are videographers, and we have Lauren Storey as an observer. Lauren is Mike's brother. This interview is conducted by the Burleson Heritage Foundation for the Library of Congress, and also for Operation Operation Remember Burleson, Texas. And with that, Mike, you can tell us your story, sir. Maybe start where you decided to go into the Army, what your family did, etc.
Okay. Well, my dad worked out at General Dynamics in Fort Worth, and Mother was a housewife. And I had always wanted to go in the Army, planned to make a career out of it. So I went in 61 and went down to Fort Hood, Texas for induction, and then went by train all the way up to Fort Carson, Colorado, at Colorado Springs. Had my basic training and advanced training up there, and then about half the company went to Germany and about half to Korea, and 12 of us had put in for the Caribbean, so we wound up going to Panama. And when we got down to Panama, I wound up in a rifle company, in a rifle squad, and was in that for a number of months. And then the captain decided that we were going to walk all the way across the isthmus. It took us 5 days going from coast to coast through the jungle during the rainy season, and we came back through the canal on an LCM. And not too long after that, since I could type, they offered me the job as company clerk, and I jumped on that, and that's probably the best thing that I ever did. And I was down there during the Cuban Missile Crisis when we were guarding the locks with an unloaded M1, and had 2 bandoliers of ammunition and fully loaded pistol belt, steel helmet, and whatnot, but wouldn't let us load the rifle. So we guarded the canal, and then when that was over, later on, I guess it was 63, we had the riots down there. We had 3 guys from our company get wounded, and during the riots, I had to go down and stayed a few days till the captain told me I was looking too much like a soldier, so he sent me back to do the morning reports. And then I guess next was the Kennedy assassination, and in August of 64, I came back up to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and was discharged. So I was out for about 2 years and didn't know for sure what I wanted to do. I went up to TCU and took the tests and passed them, but I couldn't afford to go. So I had a few little small jobs, and then decided to go back in the service in 66, and the Army wasn't going to be able to do anything for me. They told me they could, but it wasn't going to work. I wanted to go artillery, and they said they couldn't promise me anything. So the recruiter said we'd go down and talk to the chief, and I didn't know they did that. So he said, we can put you in for 2 years on a 2-year prior service enlistment, no boot camp. And so I said that sounded like a pretty good deal. I wanted to go to Vietnam. He said, you probably can go to Vietnam just because you want to go. And I said, a lot of them don't. And you can be a gunner's mate because of your infantry experience. So I enlisted in October of 66. We went out to San Diego, and within a week I had my uniforms and was on the ship. And they didn't tell me about deck force. 6 months of mess cooking and 6 months of swabbing the deck. So I thought, this we pulled out to sea, and I'm up swabbing the deck, and I thought this is going to be a long 6 months. We go down to I went down to the compartment, and as I tell people, it's almost like God put a hand on my shoulder and said, Mike, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. The division officer was down there, and he said, you still want to be a gunner's mate? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, go down and see the chief. I talked to him about you, and that afternoon I was in. It was just that doggone easy, no deck force for 6 months. So that wound up as the trainer to train the 6-inch turret. We were on a guided missile light cruiser, the USS Galveston, and they put me in a 6-inch forward turret. We had two triple 6-inch turrets and 3 twin 5-inch mounts, and then the Talos missile launcher back aft. And I wound up as studying to be the trainer on the turret, and my cleaning stations were the hoist deck, where the hoist brought the projectiles up, and the shell deck, where we had the projectiles. And they wound up sending us to the Mediterranean. Since I had put in to go to Vietnam, we went to the Mediterranean for 6 months, but we got to go through the canal. I could see my Army barracks over there, which was really interesting. Went up to Newport, Rhode Island, got to take a bus tour up to Boston, and then we went over to the Mediterranean and visited, oh gosh, probably six or eight countries over there. It was really, really neat. Got to go up, when we were in Naples, got to go up to Rome on a bus tour and see the sights and spend the night at a hotel and come back probably for no more than $30 or something, because that's probably about all I could have afforded. Oh gosh, we went to Spain, France, Malta, Crete. They had the 7-Day War while we were over there in '67, and they had carriers launching planes, and we thought we were going to war. And it turns out it had been a mistake. So we came back to the States, and I was due to get out in October of '68, and the ship, it turns out, was going over to Vietnam, and they said, well, you could extend if you want to go. So I got a 30-day leave home and got to see my brother. Extended for the 30 days. Well, we were in the yards up in Long Beach for overhaul, and then we left to go to Vietnam. We went to Pearl Harbor, and then over to Subic Bay in the Philippines, and my cousin's aircraft carrier was over there when I was there. I had seen him in San Diego. Then we went over to Da Nang Harbor, and we would go out in the daytime and fire the 6-inch guns for shore bomb, and then go back close to the harbor. I can't remember if we went in it. And then at night they'd fire the 5-inch guns for harassment and interdiction fire. And in 8 days and nights we put out over 3,600 rounds, 5 and 6-inch ammunition. And then they decided to, well, I remember the Marine spotter in a helicopter flew out over the ship, gave our captain a thumbs up. He said it's some of the most accurate shooting he'd ever seen. Said he walked us down this river and across and right up the other side. So we pulled that duty for just 8 days and nights. Then we went up guarding the carriers with our missiles. And for us gunner's mates, it's like being off San Diego. We just did our regular cleaning jobs, and that was it. The missilemen and radarmen and so on, they had their watches that they had to stand. Never did have to fire the missiles. Then we went up to Sasebo, Japan, and got to take a bus tour down to Nagasaki, which was interesting, where they dropped the second atomic bomb. Then we went back to Vietnam and patrolled guarding the carriers again, and then we went over to Hong Kong, and I got a couple of suits made there. I've still got one of them. Don't know if I can get into it, but I've still got it. And then back to, went over to Guam then, and from Guam we went back to Subic Bay, and we tied up outboard of the battleship New Jersey, who we had relieved. They're the ones that we had relieved there at Vietnam. And gosh, it was such a big difference, the New Jersey and the Galveston. It was really interesting. I remember carrying the flak jackets and the 50 caliber machine guns across her deck over to the pier, and gosh, that was a big ship. But anyway, then we came back to Hawaii, and the Enterprise had that missile that was fired on her, exploded on her fan tail. I don't remember exactly what happened, but they had scaffolding all over the fan tail, and I got to see that. And then coming back to the States, I remember we were hitting these big ground swells that were coming toward the ship. The bow would go up and go completely under, and one of the guys was sitting in the hatch in the back of the turret. We were sitting up in the gun room, and the water went down the deck and hit the barbette of turret 2 and splashed him right in the face, and we thought that was the funniest thing we had ever seen. Then, pretty soon, the whole bow was going under. Even the bosun's mates couldn't go up on deck. We had to go all the way down and through. And it was kind of neat when you were going up a ladder, you were kind of, if the bow was going down, you just boop, 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 just right on up the ladder. So it was kind of fun. So we're getting back close to the States, and I was clearing the ship. You have to clear all the different places on the ship, make sure you don't owe any money or have any equipment to turn in. And the captain's Marine orderly came up and said, "The captain wants to see you." And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because I was a good sailor. I didn't get in trouble. And went up. He said, "We just hate to see somebody come on for 2, 4, 6 years, work hard, get your discharge, and get off without anybody saying thank you." And he said, we just wanted to say thank you. And he said, "I notice you're from Texas. We're going to be coming down through Galveston in March. Come down and see us." So I went down to see him. Had to stay up on deck all day long, but got to visit with my turret boss. And I forgot to mention a while ago when we were firing over there, they took me off trainer. He said that if we have to do very much firing, he'd been over there on destroyers. He said, "If we have to do very much firing, I want you back here in the gun booth with me because I might get tired." So they put somebody else in the trainer position that I'd trained on for 2 years, put me back in the gun booth, and my contribution was to count the number of rounds, what type of ammunition, and which barrel, which was important in a way because you had rifling that couldn't be replaced till you had to replace the whole barrel. 8-inch and larger, you could replace a sleeve, but not in 6-inch. So we were down for chow one day, and turret 2 had taken over our turret, and they had casualties on the left 2 guns, and they fired 90 rounds out of the right barrel, which my turret boss was so mad when we got back. We had to fix the casualties and then fire out of the other 2 to even it out. But anyway, when I was down in Galveston, that was the last time I got to see her, and I understand that she was scrapped in the middle 70s, which just kills me, probably like every guy that was on a ship. And then I got out the day we got back, which was, I don't remember the day, but it was February of '66, and that was about it.
You did a lot of things in a relatively short period of time.
Yes, sir. Somebody told me one time, said, "You had," then with going to college and teaching for 25 years, said, "You've had a pretty interesting life." And I said, "Yeah, I guess I have," when you stop and think about it.
We'll get back to it, Mike, but
Sure,
just as
yes.
a quick comment, when you talked
Yeah.
about riding that cruiser and the bow
Mm-hmm.
going under the water, these guys, I was on 2 tin cans, and
Uh-huh.
I talked to these guys about what the ride is.
Yeah.
And they all, ha, ha, ha. Well, he was on, that cruiser was 6,000 tons? Something like
I'm
that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't
6,
remember.
7?
Yeah.
a lot bigger ship than a destroyer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they didn't ride real nice.
Oh,
So anyway.
that guy that was my turret boss that had been on destroyers said that he had seen it so rough that the captain had the crew members that weren't on watch go down, get in their bunks, take the bunk straps, and put across them because it was that rough. If you got thrown up against the bulkhead, couldn't remember, like I said, I had to learn all this. Got thrown up against the bulkhead with an iron, steel, it could knock you out. So it was pretty doggone tough. One thing I remember, we had a guy on, I never got seasick in the whole time I was on, which was interesting because right before we got to Barcelona, Spain, we had hit a hellacious storm that busted the muzzle bags off of they were painted canvas, and it busted them off of the guns, and we got salt water all up in there. So we had to stay up till about 2 or 3 in the morning cleaning up salt water and re-oiling. And but anyway, the corpsman told me that one of our guys that worked in personnel said he would get seasick for anything. So he came down there, and all they had to say was, "Hey, Manahan," he and said they just finished swabbing and waxing the passageway, and this guy came running down. He said, "Where's the head? Where's the head?" And they said, "What do you want to know for?" And but I never did.
You have
Yes.
You have a really good memory for this stuff too. When you think about the fact that this is 40+ years ago, you're talking
a little
about.
bit ago, yeah.
You do remember a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Going back when you started, we know that you have a brother, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
How many kids were there?
Just the two.
The two of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when we both came back on leave, the folks had us go to church in our uniforms. They were pretty proud, weren't they? That was kind of
And
neat.
they should have been.
Yeah, that was
Certainly
kind of
should have
neat. Mm-hmm.
Nice thing to do.
Yeah.
When you went to Panama first time,
Mm-hmm.
was Noriega in power?
To be
I guess.
honest with you, that I do not. Yeah,
Okay.
that I do not remember.
Let me back up. Where did you do your? Well, you said you did your basic at Carson.
Yeah, Fort Carson. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Basic and AIT, both up there.
Cuban Missile Crisis. You guarded the locks on the canal.
Mm-hmm. They didn't know but what somebody might try to break in and damage the locks so that ships couldn't get through. And
Was that all a U.S. operation, or were there Panamanian soldiers with you, or?
no, we were just us. And what I did, I kept the bolt back on my rifle so that I could on the M1, and kept the fabric off of my clip so that I could pull that thing out, flip that thing around, and load it right quick. But nothing ever happened. It was,
Did you think there was a real threat?
No,
back then, Mike?
not really.
Okay.
Main thing I remember was the first time I pulled that duty, 4 hours walking up and down with all that equipment on, and I went to climb up in the truck, and my hips were so sore I could hardly. I'd been company clerking for a while.
The Kennedy assassination.
Mm-hmm.
What'd
They
you do
brought.
special?
They just brought. And they didn't know at the time who'd done it, so we went on alert, and we were always having some kind of alert down there. But we went on alert, and they brought ammunition down and stacked it outside each barracks just in case, because as I said, they didn't know who had done it. Once they found out, well, then it was went off alert, and they took the ammunition away. But,
How long were you on alert? Remember how long?
oh, no, it couldn't have been too long, but I don't remember offhand. It wasn't but maybe a day or so, as I remember. But that's one of the one of the things I don't remember.
Going from the Army to the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
You go in. You were assigned to the Galveston right off.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only ship you were ever on.
The only one I was
Okay.
on, which was really fortunate.
Being a cruiser, you had a Commodore. You had some big boss on board, I would imagine.
Just the captain.
Captain.
Yeah, except when we
Four
went.
striper.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. One I showed you the picture of. when we went to the Mediterranean, for a while we had an admiral on board, but he was, in fact, that's why we had to leave Barcelona, Spain after 2 days. He had a conference over in Toulon, France, so we had to go take him over there, so we never got back to Barcelona. And we did get to take a bus tour down from Toulon down to Cannes, and that was kind of neat. And then later on we got to go back, came back after the 7-day war to Marseille, so we got to visit quite a few. And as I said, Naples and Sicily, Majorca, Crete, all of those different.
I asked before we started about holy stoning the deck. Did you ever?
I never had to do it.
Okay.
But I saw
First Division.
Yeah, I saw the
Okay.
bosun's mate get awfully upset if anybody got oil or something. Once in a while, when they were taking on fuel, oil would.
Tell us what holy stoning is first, I guess.
Well, yeah, we had teak wood decks, and they had hemp and then tar down between the boards, and they had to keep them clean, almost white. And so what they would do, besides swabbing the deck if they got too dirty or they got oil or something on them, they actually had a brick. I don't know that I ever really looked at one that closely, but it looked like a regular brick with a notch in the top. They would put sand down and then wet it, put the brick down. They had a long, kind of like a mop handle that they would put in that notch, and they had some way of holding it. I can't remember exactly now. And they would go like this and slide that back and forth, and the sand would grind the impurities out of the teak wood. And when we were over in Hawaii, Hong Kong, one of the old bosun's mates, the chief, knew a woman that was in charge of one of the repair facilities over there, and he had them come in. I'm sure the captain and all of them knew about it too, but had them come in and take all the old hemp and tar out and redo that. So that was kind of neat.
We called that outfit Mary Sue and her side.
Yes, I think yeah. I think that's because I've got
I think
a
that must
picture
have
of
been a
it.
generic term because
Yeah.
there were a lot of those folks.
I've got cruise books, and the cruise book has a picture of the chief there with her, and I think it seemed like her name was Mary something. Yeah, that's interesting.
You had 6-inch guns.
Yes, 6-inch 47.
You were in a 6-inch turret.
Yes,
That was a projectile, and then you had powder behind it, right?
Right. They
How
were
big-
separate.
How big was
Yeah.
the projectile?
About so tall and 6 inches in diameter.
What did it weigh? You got any remember?
Yeah, they were. The high capacity was 105. The armor
105 pounds.
105 pounds. The armor piercing, which we never fired, was I think 135, and the practice, which we fired a lot of, were 130. Because one time we usually had bosun's mates and others bringing the ammunition on board, and the gunner's mates would instruct them where to take it. But we get up to Newport, Rhode Island, and they said, "We've got practice ammunition out there in the truck. Send the gunner's mates out to get it." So here I'm 130 pounds. The projectile is 130 pounds. We had to take it out of the back of the truck, carry it up the pier, up the officer's gangway, up the quarterdeck, and hand it into the back of the turret. And I think by the time I finished the first one, my knees were going like that. So I don't know how I carried the second one, but we did get them up there.
Do you remember how much powder you used to push that projectile?
The powder can was about so tall, and it was also close to 6 inches in diameter. Brass powder
was
cans.
brass,
Yes,
okay.
it was brass. 5 and 6 inch both. And I forgot now exactly what they call them, but the 5 and 6 inch or semi whatever, where the projectile and the powder can were separate. And but we had the powder can. The 8-inch cruisers had powder bags. Had powder bags, yeah.
How far could you throw that shell?
I think it was close to 20 miles. I can't remember for sure. I should know.
When you were Da Nang and you were off the beach there, could you see land when you were shooting?
Oh yeah, I can't
good.
remember. I was back in the turret booth. We called it the booth, watching them load and fire. And so I can't, I didn't look through. We had a periscope right there, but I don't remember whether, surely I did look through it. What was kind of interesting when I was the trainer, when the guns would fire, they would fire and recoil, then the breech block would go down, the powder can would come clanking out, and the chain drive would take it out the back of the turret. Then the gas ejection air would cut in and blow any burning embers out the barrel. In fact, they even had a fire hose out there with a 90-degree snorkel on it that they could put down in the barrel if they got a hang fire to force the heat. The water would force the heat out of the barrel. If they sprayed the outside, it would force it into and could explode. And that was kind of neat. I remember we were firing over there one time, and they had a powder can get caught between the chain drive and the lifeline out there. And I remember our turret ensign opened that hatch and kicked that thing loose and enclosed the hatch. And the only time we ever had a hang fire was during practice one time, and we had a guy on that had been on the old Helena, I think it was, during World War II. And we had a hang fire, and the thing started smoking. The powder can started smoking. He said, "Everybody out of the turret." So I had the farthest to go. We got out of the turret and waited the prescribed time, and they took the breech block down and then threw the powder can over the side. And
How many guys in that turret, 6-inch turret?
oh gosh, dog.
You had 3 barrels.
3 barrels, and you had at least 4. I think it was at least 4 guys on each barrel for the put the powder in. You had a guy that did the ramming. Had another one that took the powder. The projectile hoist came up, and you take hold of the nose of the 6-inch projectile, pull it down, put your arm under it, turn around, and put it in the tray. And then the powder guys, it came up behind the guns. They would take it, put it in, and then the guy with the rammer would, it was mechanical, would ram it up in there, and then the breech block would come up. So if I'm over, what I started to say a while ago, if I'm over in the trainer position, and sometimes we could even look out the little telescope thing we had. We didn't usually they fired from down inside the ship. But what I was going to say, when they would fire, I'm sitting there with the earphones on, and you'd hear boom, clank, 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 psh, and then they'd load again, and then same thing all over again. So it's kind of interesting. It wasn't real loud inside, which is hard to imagine, because I've been outside when the 5-inch fired, and it was loud. But the 6-inch, even with all that armor up there, it was.
There was a lot of physical labor involved in firing those guns.
Oh yeah, it was. The projectile, even though it was heavy, the way you pull it out though, you could get it in there pretty easy. Of course, that's easy to say because I didn't have to do it.
It was a dangerous place to work, though.
Oh, it could be.
These instances you talk about, if you would have had an explosion in that turret,
yeah.
that explosion is contained all within the turret.
Yeah, the Iowa here a while back, you remember, had one and did a bunch during one of the one up fairly recently, and hurt a bunch of people. Yeah, we had one guy get his hand caught in the breech block. He was somebody was leaning over, I forgot now. Anyway, the breech block came up, and luckily the gas ejection air wasn't on, or it could have taken his hand off, but just caught him. And so they said, get air in the accumulator. And he said, no, he was smart. Said, you'll cut my hand off. So they lowered it manually, and then had to take him over to the carrier to get it x-rayed. But like you said, it could be, could be dangerous.
You were single all the time you were in the military?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Until I was 40, so that was a long time.
30 days leave in the yard, and that's when you extended. Mm-hmm. When you went on this cruiser, when you went across the Pacific, mm-hmm. you were not by yourselves, were you? You go in company with other ships?
You know, I can't remember. I kind of don't think we were. I think we went
By
went by
yourselves?
ourselves because you know, didn't have to worry about subs or anything like World War II. So I kind of think we went by ourselves, if I remember correctly, and came back the same way.
Fired 3,600 rounds in 8 days.
8 days and nights.
In Vietnam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Missiles. You didn't fire the missiles while you were in country, but you must have fired them exercise
Yeah,
sometime?
exercises occasionally. Yeah, and that was
But
pretty,
you were a gunner's mate
Gunner's
not
mate
a
guns.
gunner's mate missile.
I never got to go in the missile house. It was restricted. They had Marines on board, detachment of Marines that were in charge of security. And they were always having breach of security drills, and you'd be on the mess deck, make a hole, and they come running through with, and one guy hit the hatch at port arms, threw it. Probably new to the ship, but it was funny. But I got to go on the USS Little Rock that's up in Buffalo. It's the only light cruiser left, and we got to go through the missile house. It was open, so we got to go through. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
When you laugh about this Marine running down that, or from one space through the hatch, you come out of the Army, spend a couple years in civilian life, go back in, didn't have the benefit of boot camp. When you went on that cruiser the first time, have some idea where the stern was and where the bow was, what was port, what was starboard?
We asked the bosun's mate, and he saw us coming, and he gave us some long-winded story, and by the time he finished, we still didn't know port from starboard. So all he had to say was, as you face the bow of the ship, starboard's to the right, port's to the left. And then on our ship, when you had general quarters, you went up starboard and down port, so you didn't run into each other. I didn't know if it was that way or not. I assumed it was that standard. Okay, yeah, but that was but that detachment.
But you
of
had the
Marines,
whole terminology to pick up.
all of it.
Swabs
All
and
of it.
heads and
When we went on the LST, I remember our officers. Since I was company clerk, I was in the orderly room, and I remember the officers asking, you know, how do we salute? Do we salute the flag first, or the officer of the deck first? They didn't know either. So as I said, I had to learn all of that. I didn't know the ranks. You know, there's a lot to learn.
skipper that called you up said thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You remember his name?
I don't.
Okay.
I've got it in my cruise book, and I was telling somebody on our cruise to Alaska, and I meant to look it up when I got home. The first one was Merrill Sappington, the one that I had the picture of, but I don't remember the second one's name.
You had a casualty on 2 guns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mechanical casualty that quit functioning for whatever reason. I don't remember now what they
But
were.
that's casualty just meant it
wouldn't
wouldn't shoot.
shoot. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on a 6-inch, that was a solid barrel, bored and rifled.
Right.
But on 8 and larger, there was a sleeve.
The sleeve, 8-inch and 16-inch. They could remove that sleeve, rifle sleeve, and replace it, but not.
It's like a sleeve in a diesel engine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But not
Okay.
on 6 or 5.
Compartment. Didn't say anything about what it was like to live on that cruiser.
Oh,
You were gunner's mate forward, aft. Where was your?
well, we
your
started
berthing
out. We
compartment?
started out up forward. We were up forward. In fact, they even had the brig up there. The Marines would come up, and they were in charge of the brig, and it was in our compartment. Then they finally moved us back. Gosh, it's hard to remember now exactly where on the ship, below decks. And of course, before we went to Vietnam, they put a big old Carrier brand air conditioning unit down there, and we thought this is going to be great. They never hooked it up, so we baked the whole time we were over there. They had one on the mess deck, which was great, and I'm sure they hooked it up in the engineering spaces, but not on ours. So we had blowers that pulled air in from outside, and we had fans, and that was it. So it was hot. I would go down and eat supper, mess, and watch a movie or something, go back, take a shower, get in my bunk and read or write a letter. I kept a wet washcloth laying there to keep wiping the sweat off with. And I remember in the morning I'd wake up and my pillow would just be wet with sweat. And
How many guys you have in a compartment, berthing compartment?
well, it was the whole turret 1 and turret 2, the crew from both of those.
So
And I
you'd
guess
have-
the 5-inch too.
You
Guess
have
that's
40, 50, 60 guys in a compartment?
Could have been maybe 30 or 40.
30 or
I
40?
can't remember if it was that many. We had 3 bunks high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And racks, they call them. They'd trice them up. I remember that term, trice them up, so they could swab under them and so on. But we had the metal lockers, and
Well, you had an interesting time, sir.
well, thank you.
Certainly
I thought
did,
I
and,
thought it
and you
was.
tell a good story.
Well, thank you.
Really
I
do.
appreciate
you,
it.
You remember a lot of the detail, and we've done a few of these things, and
Oh,
a lot
have
of
you?
things you say are certainly new to us.
Huh? Well, I'll be darned.
We
That's-
appreciate
that's
you
neat.
taking the time to come visit with us this morning.
Well,
We
thank you.
appreciate your time in the military, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. You ask good questions, interesting questions. Make me think.